Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something frustrating yet really common. This paradox of modern success. You might have hit every career milestone, devoured all the productivity books, maybe even perfected that power look. But there's still this nagging lack of fulfillment, this inner hunger. Or maybe it's just failing to follow through on basic promises you make to yourself.
Yeah, it's that gap, isn't it, between the outside achievement and the inner reality. We looked at research arguing society basically shifted its focus away from foundational character towards more superficial skills. So our mission really in this deep dives is to figure out why all these quick fix solutions seem to fail when we try to tackle these deep chronic human problems. We need to explore where genuine lasting effectiveness, the kind that leads to real personal congruency actually comes from.
That sounds like a pretty big challenge to the whole self-help industry, actually. So let's unpack this. We're going to start with the symptoms, the painful professional and personal problems, things shared even by really accomplished people. Then we'll trace the history, look at the split between what's called the character ethic and the personality ethic. After that, we dive deep into the mind, define the power of paradigms, the sort of mental maps we use without thinking. And finally, we'll identify the lighthouses, the unchanging principles that should anchor everything. Okay, so when we look at the material, these problems feel, well, painfully familiar. Maybe you, listening right now, have achieved huge professional success, but the cost. Maybe it's been steep. Your health, perhaps, your relationship with your kids, maybe even a divorce. And you ask yourself, was it worth it? That sense of inner conflict can be really sharp.
Or maybe it's closer to home, affecting your daily discipline perhaps. You start a new diet, you use positive mental visualization, you tell yourself, I can do it. Only to find yourself struggling again after just 2 weeks. You feel like you can't keep a simple promise to yourself, and no amount of positive thinking seems to fix that really deep-seated habit.
Exactly. And these aren't just minor hiccups, are they? We see managers who go to leadership courses, they memorize all the right phrases, they try to treat employees the right way, but they still face like zero employee loyalty. If that manager leaves the room, everyone's immediately, checking their phones or chatting. Why don't those techniques build real trust?
Because these problems run deep. They're not surface issues. A time management system might organize your schedule perfectly, but if you still feel constantly pressured, hassled, well, the system hasn't solved the core problem, which is usually about not prioritizing based on what truly matters deep down. These issues just cannot be solved by quick fixes or social band-aids. You really need a paradigm shift, not just another patch.
Right. And to show just how deep this goes, the authors share this really honest personal story, their struggle with their own son. He was having a terrible time, poor grades, kind of socially immature, and physically uncoordinated. In baseball, apparently, he'd swing way too early, miss the ball, and the other kids would laugh. It was tough.
Yeah.
The parents were determined to help him.
And naturally, they reach for the modern tools. Positive mental attitude techniques. They were constantly cheering him on. Come on, son, you can do it. Hands higher on the bat, that kind of thing. If he showed even the slightest improvement, they'd reinforce it like crazy, often getting mad at anyone who laughed. But he just kept crying, insisting he was no good, it wasn't working.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting and totally ineffective. Their big aha moment came when they realized their efforts were failing because they were rooted in a fundamental misperception, a flawed paradigm. Despite all the kind words, what they were really communicating nonverbally was doubt. You're inadequate, son, and you need us to protect you. They realized their whole focus was wrong. They eventually figured out to change the situation, we first had to change ourselves, and crucially, our perceptions. And that realization led them to investigate how this whole idea of success had shifted over time.
Exactly. And that personal struggle spurred this deep historical dive, analyzing 200 years of success literature starting way back in 1776. And the pattern they uncovered was, well, it was startling. For the first century and a half, roughly pre-World War I, the idea of success focused almost entirely on what they call the character ethic.
The character ethic, okay, so what does that mean exactly? It defines success based on internal stuff, right? Foundational traits. Integrity, humility, fidelity, temperance, patience, industry. And the golden rule, above all, Benjamin Franklin's autobiography is pointed out as a key example of this. The core belief was that real, lasting success and happiness came from integrating these principles deep into your actual character.
Yes, exactly. The focus was on being before doing, who you are. But then, pretty soon after World War I, the focus shifted dramatically towards what the literature calls the personality ethic. Suddenly, success became much more about your outward presentation,
Mhm.
personality, public image, attitudes, behaviors, skills, basically techniques to lubricate human interaction, smooth things over.
Right. And this personality ethic sort of went down two paths, didn't it? There were the human relations techniques, how to influence people, and then the positive mental attitude or PMA track.
That's right. And here's where the critique really comes in. The research suggests that a lot of this personality stuff is dangerously superficial. It offers, like you said before, social band-aids instead of actual cures. And some of it, frankly, seemed to encourage manipulation, using techniques to get people to like you, pretending interest in their hobbies, maybe using a certain power look. Character, well, it became secondary. Something you paid lip service to, maybe, but not the core.
Okay, let me just push back slightly there, because I imagine some listeners thinking, hang on, are presentation skills important? Isn't having a positive attitude just necessary in professional life today? Is the research maybe being a bit too harsh? Aren't these secondary traits still needed?
That's a really fair question. And
Hmm.
the answer isn't that they're useless. They're often useful, sometimes even essential, but they are secondary. They only work long-term if they're backed by genuine character. Think back to the son. The parents were using textbook personality ethic techniques,
Hmm.
PMA, reinforcement. But it failed. Why? Because their deeper motive, their underlying perception was flawed. They were driven by social comparison, wanting their son to do well so they looked like good parents. Their actions were totally out of sync with that deeper feeling, and the son picked up on that dissonance immediately.
Ah, I see. So the techniques themselves weren't necessarily bad, but they failed because they didn't align with the parents' flawed internal map or paradigm. They needed to change the being, their own perception and motive before the doing the techniques could actually work.
Precisely. And this leads us straight to this crucial distinction the research makes between primary and secondary greatness. Secondary greatness is all those personality traits we just talked about. Communication skills, influence strategies, positive thinking, it's sort of social recognition for your talents.
Okay, so that's secondary.
Yeah.
What's primary greatness then?
Primary greatness is different. It's about deep integrity, fundamental character strength. That's the bedrock, the foundation.
Right. And the big problem, the flaw, is trying to build on technique without that solid character foundation.
Absolutely. Technique without character is inherently unstable. If your foundation is shaky, if there's duplicity, insincerity, any technique you use to influence others will eventually feel manipulative. People sense it. You breed distrust, and you ultimately fail, especially in the long run. It's only basic goodness, that primary greatness, that gives real life and authenticity to any technique.
This reminds me of that analogy they use, the natural system one, the law of the harvest.
Oh, it's the perfect metaphor. Because in artificial systems, like, say, school, you can sometimes get away with shortcuts. You can cram for a test, right?
Hmm.
But in farming or in human relationships, which are also natural systems, you absolutely reap what you sow. There are no shortcuts. If you only focus on the technique, making it look like you have a full granary but you forgot to plant in the spring, well, you can't cram a harvest in the fall. It just doesn't work. Growth takes time.
And this feels particularly true in those really long-term relationships. Marriage, working with colleagues for years, raising children. In those situations, those secondary traits alone, they just have no permanent worth, do they? If your technique is based on faking it or manipulation, the truth always comes out eventually. And worse, the idea of having to borrow strength, relying on your job title, your status, your authority, maybe just being bigger or louder to force compliance, that actually stunts growth, doesn't it?
It builds weakness.
Yeah.
Weakness in everyone involved. The relationship becomes rooted in fear or maybe dependence instead of genuine cooperation. You end up with brittle obedience, not real connection or productivity.
Okay, so to move away from borrowing strength and towards that intrinsic character, we have to deal with that root issue, the misperception, the flawed map. Which brings us neatly to this concept of the paradigm.
Right. The word itself comes from Greek, basically meaning a model or a pattern. But simply put, a paradigm is just the way we see the world. It's our mental map.
Hmm.
We all have these maps, maps of reality, the way things are, and maps of values, the way things ought to be.
And the crucial insight here, the one that really unlocks things, is that the map is not the territory. It's like
Ah,
if you were trying to navigate Dallas, but you were mistakenly using a map of Miami, no amount of positive attitude or driving faster or better planning based on that wrong map would help. You'd just get more efficiently lost. Your fundamental problem isn't your behavior, it's the wrong map.
exactly. We interpret everything through these internal maps, and often we don't even realize we're doing it. We just assume the way we see things is the way they objectively are. But as the research shows, Our attitudes and behaviors, the doing part, flow directly, almost automatically, from those underlying maps, the seeing part. Our paradigms dictate our actions.
This is shown so clearly in that famous visual experiment they describe, the one where students were shown, just for a few seconds, either an image emphasizing a young woman or one emphasizing an old woman, before being shown the single composite image that contains both.
Yes, that demonstration is remarkable because both groups are looking at the exact same lines on the paper. The objective facts are identical, yet they argue fiercely. The group conditioned briefly to see the young woman sees, a stylish young lady. The other group sees a sad, older figure. And they can't initially see what the other group sees at all.
And that initial conditioning only took 10 seconds. It's incredible. It just proves how powerfully our conditioning affects our perception. We walk around assuming we see things objectively, but really, we see the world as we are conditioned to see it, not necessarily as it is. It makes so much sense why disagreements happen, even when people seem to be looking at the same facts. They're interpreting them through radically different internal maps, different paradigms.
And trying to change your attitude or behavior without addressing that underlying, potentially flawed paradigm. Well, that's why the personality ethic often gets stuck just dealing with surface issues. It doesn't go deep enough. So that realization that our perception, our paradigm is the root, leads us to the incredible power of a true paradigm shift. This is the aha moment, the moment the light bulb goes on. Think about big scientific revolutions like Copernicus realizing the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. It's a complete break with tradition, with old ways of thinking that creates powerful, significant, quantum change.
And the literature gives such a vivid illustration of how fast and complete this change can be. That classic story set on a New York subway car. The scene is peaceful, quiet. Then a man and his children get on, and the kids are immediately just wild, yelling, throwing things, running around, bothering people. Total chaos. And the father just sits there, next to the observer in the story, apparently oblivious, staring blankly ahead.
Right. And the observer gets more and more irritated, thinking, can't this guy control his kids? What's wrong with him? It builds and builds. Finally, he just can't take it anymore. He snaps, turns to the father, and says something like, perhaps not very politely, hey, shouldn't you get your children under control?
And the father slowly looks up, as if coming out of a fog, and says softly, oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about it. We just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. Honestly, I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either.
Wow. And that single sentence, it just shatters the observer's paradigm instantly. All the irritation, the anger, the judgment, poof, gone in an instant. Replaced by this spontaneous wave of sympathy, compassion, understanding.
He didn't have to try to control his attitude. He didn't need to practice empathy skills.
Right.
The second he saw the situation differently, through a new paradigm, his whole emotional response and subsequent behavior changed. Automatically. That feels like the core difference, right? Between just tinkering with the surface and actually changing the foundation.
Exactly. For minor adjustments, maybe focusing on attitude and behavior is fine. Hacking at the leaves. But for the significant quantum change needed for real effectiveness, you absolutely have to work on the basic paradigms. As Thoreau put it, we need to stop hacking at the leaves of evil and start striking at the root.
Okay, so if the old character ethic holds the key and we need to shift our paradigms, what should our paradigm be centered on? This is where the discussion moves from our internal maps to the actual territory itself to principles.
Right. Principles aren't just, nice values or good ideas. The argument is that they are like natural laws, but in the human dimension. Just like gravity is a natural law in the physical dimension. They're universal, they're timeless, they're self-evident, woven into the fabric of basically every successful, enduring society or civilization.
And the key idea is we can't break these laws, right? We only end up breaking ourselves against them if we try to ignore them.
That's the core insight. And it's captured perfectly in that story. Maybe you've heard it about the battleship captain. He's on maneuvers in heavy fog, sees a light dead ahead, clearly on a collision course. Determined to maintain his path, he signals the light. Change course 20 degrees. I am a captain. The reply comes back. Advisable for you to change course 20 degrees. I'm a seaman second class.
Ha, furious, right? The captain can't believe the insubordination, so he sends the final pull rank message. I am a battleship. Change course 20 degrees. Now.
And the final simple signal comes back. I'm a lighthouse.
They changed course immediately. Wow, that lighthouse, that represents the principle. Unmoving, unbreakable. Principles like fairness, integrity, honesty, human dignity, service, potential. They are the unchanging territory. They just are.
Yeah.
Trying to live by their opposites, unfairness, deceit, uselessness. It's fundamentally dysfunctional.
And it's really vital here to quickly distinguish principles from practices. A practice is a specific action, a how-to. Like maybe shaking hands is a good practice in one culture but not another. Practices are situational. Principles, though, are deep fundamental truths that apply everywhere. Fairness is fairness. Integrity is integrity. And when we manage to align our internal maps, our paradigms, with these external lighthouses of principle, that's when we enable true, sustainable, long-term personal effectiveness. And we avoid that endless frustration of trying to find shortcuts around the natural sequential process of growth and development. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. Circling back to our mission for this deep dive, what's the core takeaway? It seems we've learned that for real, lasting change, we have to start with the being, our fundamental character and motives. That allows the seeing, our perception, our paradigm to shift and align with reality, with principles. And only then can the doing, our attitudes and behaviors, spontaneously align with truly effective habits without constant effort and willpower.
That's it, exactly. That's the pathway to genuine congruency, where your actions naturally flow from your core values. So maybe here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away and mull over. The research strongly suggests that your level of emotional maturity, how developed your character is, directly determines your capacity to give essential qualities like patience or understanding or empathy to others, especially under pressure. So the next time you face a really difficult relationship problem, maybe with your kids or a colleague or your partner, instead of immediately jumping to techniques or trying to force a behavioral change, ask yourself, what's my current level here? Am I trying to borrow strength using my authority or position or maybe subtle manipulation? Or am I operating from my own intrinsic character strength? Am I drawing on primary greatness? That moment of self-reflection might just be the first step toward truly aligning yourself with those lighthouses.